What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of our virtual classroom. It's me, Professor Max. As you can see, today we're going to be talking about ambient music, what the heck it is, and how we could be making it on our own using free software, most of which you're already familiar with, like an LMMS. Um, but first, I want to talk about ambient music, what it is in theory, and a little bit of the history behind it, and which is why I have this image up behind me. Yes, it's a meme, obviously, keep you interested. But we're going to talk about a little bit of the history, and then we're going to, sort of implement some of these theory processes through our own composition and show you some of the basics using mostly built-in synthesizers. We might add a sampler or two, but we're going to keep it mostly towards applying these ambient music theories in synthesis formats, environments. So what is ambient music? Let's talk about it, right? So this guy right here that you can see in front of me is a gentleman who goes by the name of Brian Eno. So Brian Eno is a pretty famous, I think he's knighted in England where he's from, pretty famous musician, producer, composer, multimedia artist. He's made some really cool apps, musical apps and things like that for iOS and things, but he's primarily known as this really well-known composer and producer, music producer. So he got his, first claims to fame in the early '70s through this what they called the glam rock era with a group called Roxy Music. You should check them out. Though that wasn't where he started really making his legacy. When Roxy Music broke up, I believe he started work. Well, he was always producing the music for Roxy Music and other bands at the time in the '70s, but towards the end of the '70s, he had sort of started going in a solo direction as a composer and more experimental music and less of the rock format, though he continues to produce a lot of rock albums for different artists, such as the Talking Heads, David Byrne, thing like that. But in 1978, he coined a new term along with the release of a new album. The album was called Ambient 1, Music for Airports. This is in 1978. So Ambient 1, Music for Airports is the record that comes out. And with it comes this term that Brian Eno has coined called ambient music. Now, to Brian Eno, ambient music's definition is something that could be, literally played in an environment and can be theoretically ignored. Now, this theory of music that is, background music of an environment that's meant to soothe you or meant to be, not distracting in a way, is not invented with Brian Eno. That dates back to Erik Satie, the composer from the late 1800s in France. He's very well known for a lot of his pieces, such as the piano works Gymnopédies and Gnossienne. Those two pieces, I'll link to them in the classroom so you can hear those pieces. But once you hear them, I'm sure you're going to be like, oh, I know this because it's very well known. But what Erik Satie did was he actually started this concept for his acoustic, chamber music called furniture music, which is where it would be played in salons, parties, not concert halls, but smaller venues, and it had his ensemble members scattered throughout the space, so there wasn't one stage area. It was rather the music is surrounding the people, and the people are just there walking around talking to themselves. They're encouraged not to really stop and listen and pay attention to the music and musicians themselves, but rather to try as best they can to ignore it, though it wasn't very successful because people were very interested in this concept and were, they wanted to pay attention because they liked Erik Satie as a composer. But anyways, so this idea of ignorable background music dates back almost 100 years prior to Brian Eno's coining of the term ambient music. But what makes ambient music specific and very special is this idea that you're utilizing new technologies such as synthesizers, computers, the recording studio in general, not acoustic music that's meant to necessarily be just performed on stage, but more specifically recorded music, audio itself, that in a musical sense is very soothing. You know, Brian Eno created this album, Music for Airports, in response to what he thought was, a lack of, a lack of realistically, interesting and, sort of problematic music that he was hearing at airports in the 1970s. Because Muzak, the term for elevator music, was such a, it started to become a thing, and the music being played at airports, according to Eno, was too positive in the uplifting sense, in the sense that you are at an airport and you shouldn't be nervous to be here. Don't be nervous. You're flying. Blah blah blah. It's not. It was they were trying to soothe anxieties towards flying at airports by playing this more rambunctious top 40s poppy whatever music, and to Eno that wasn't doing it for him. He wanted to create music that was melancholic and reflective, not in a very in-your-face abrasive way, but in a way that was more creeping up on you sonically. So it had a lot of softer sounds. It had a lot of loops that weren't necessarily gridded towards a time signature in a at least in a recognizable way. There's not a lot of percussion instruments that are playing beats and things like that. This is a lot more soothing. So that is really the bread and butter of what makes ambient music is utilizing technology to create something that's a little more. I wouldn't necessarily keep using the word soothing, because of course there's dark ambient music and things like that that is not necessarily soothing and comforting sounds, but these are sounds that are not abrasive. We can use that term, unabrasive sounds. These are things that can be played in the background and should be played in the background. They're meant to reflect the environment, your listening environment that you're in. And oftentimes we hear it, at least with using specific technology and specific synthesis techniques, utilizing the envelope of a synthesizer to create very slow attacks. These slow attacks on the envelopes in synth create something called a pad. A pad is meant to be sort of a wash of sound, a wall of sound, if you will, played through a synthesizer that's not being it's not really being meant like a arpeggiator in that synth wave classic sort of classic sort of arpeggiated rhythmic synthesizer. We're not really going for that here. We're going more for the opposite. We're going for softer sounds that don't reflect rhythm necessarily, but reflect texture. Texture is the name of the game here. So Brian Eno's Ambient 1, Music for Airports, is a huge success and very, very influential. And it creates a new genre, ambient music. You could argue that krautrock and things like that from the 60s, certain eras in Europe and parts of the countercultural America, definitely had hints of or qualities of what would be called ambient music later on. But Brian Eno is the first to really use the term, and it has continued to become, it has been, universally used now to reflect this type of music and describe this type of music. So Ambient 1, Music for Airports, is about 4 pieces long. It's 4 pieces long, and they consist of recorded loops of different lengths that are played, so different time signatures. Maybe one is in 1, 2, 3, 4, one is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 7, etc., etc. And these loops are played at different lengths, and they're played over each other so that they're not necessarily all playing on the same downbeat. So you as a listener are not hearing for the and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. You are sort of absorbing all of these different loops happening at once, and they all sound very consonant, very harmonically pleasing, and they're very slow. So you're able to kind of take it all in and hear these loops played not necessarily all at once in the same order. So it creates a mass of sound. You're not necessarily hearing one sound at a time, but you can obviously listen and pay attention, and you pick out the individual sounds, but that kind of goes against the grain of what it's all about with ambient music, which is to hear it more as a sound mass. So Brian Eno, he had a ambient series following the Ambient 1 record. It goes Ambient 1, 2, 3, and 4, all sort of following this theory that he's developed of making music that is meant to be, a mass of, let's say, unabrasive sound, So this has obviously gone off and continued and become an entire legacy of music in the electronic music world. There's ambient techno. Ambient music now is being reflected again in more neoclassical environments that are starting to create music with both acoustic instruments and electronic music. People like Stars the Lid, Max Richter, ambient rock ensembles, things like Windy and Carl, composers like Reese Chatham, things like that. These composers definitely falling partially in the classical minimalist sort of, connections there in a lot of ways. But minimalist music doesn't necessarily mean that it's meant to be absorbed in a sound mass way. There's very, simplified, non-textural, minimalist music, while ambient music sort of falls in this unabrasive textural category. So with that being said, it goes well beyond what you would consider to be, experimental avant-garde. Many people argue that lo-fi hip-hop is sort of the amalgamation of hip-hop and ambient sort of theory being combined together, because what is lo-fi hip-hop most notably known for is known as lo-fi beats to chill and study to, and ambient music is absolutely falling to music that has been created for you to chill and study to, sleep to, things like that. People sleep to lo-fi hip-hop too. So one could argue that the traditions that were started or at least solidified with Brian Eno have spurred off into so many different genres that it's hard to tell what exactly, where it all sort of begins, what the theory lies in musically. But we can definitely fall into this category of, the unabrasive sound mass as sort of the bread and butter of what makes ambient music. And most importantly, something that can be played not only in the foreground for your, engaged listening pleasure, but also to be played in the background, such as lo-fi, things like that. And film score, absolutely in the film score world, you are seeing the adaptation of traditional film score tropes being sort of brought into the electronic sphere, and ambient music has become so crucial towards that. Not just film score, media scoring in general, video games, television. We're looking at games such as Journey, that is almost entirely an ambient cello and electronic score. You look at games like Far Cry 5, which had 3 commercial record releases for their soundtracks, 3 different soundtracks being released, one of which was just an entirely ambient soundtrack created by a group called Hammock, who's known as, it's an ambient band making a score for a video game. There are composers out there in both the traditional ambient world and what we call the more dark ambient world, which is not necessarily consonant, soothing, chordal, melodic materials, but much more atonal, not abrasive in the same way as like noise, but atonal in the sense that you're not hearing like a nice chord. You're hearing darker textures that you can't necessarily tell the melodic or harmonic materials, and that's kind of the point. So you have artists making dark ambient music and light ambient music. Dark ambient was a term coined later by an artist named Lustmord. We talked about him in earlier projects, talking about sound design, because dark ambient and traditional ambient music both sort of blur the lines in a lot of ways and engage in sound design almost as much as they engage in like traditional music composition, because you have to get into the nitty-gritties of your synthesizers and your instruments that you're using and the technologies that you have in order to create these sound masses, in order to create these digital, these recorded sonic environments, soundscapes, musical soundscapes, if you will. So it's really important that we take the time to go through these steps in what would be considered the traditional ambient sound. So what I'd like to do now is sort of following the theories of Brian Eno's Music for Airports Chapter 1. It's the first track on it. It's called 1/1 actually. What we're going to do is we're actually going to create an ambient track, which is just a set of loops. And you already know how to make loops. So we're going to create a set of loops that aren't playing at the same lengths. So we're going to be creating different sounds that start here and end there, and play over each other in many different layers, so that while using some of the same tools that Brian Eno has used in production and synthesis in order to create this textural, unabrasive, and consonant harmonic sound mass. So thank you, Brian Eno. Where is he? He's over there. There he is, pointing over there. Hey, Brian, good work. Now that we've talked about ambient music, let's make ambient music. And we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We're back in the Inception Matrix. Let's get out of here real quick. Just making sure that all my sounds work. Okay, it works. Cool. All right, so we are in LMMS today. Going to be making some ambient music here in this environment since we talked about it in the last lecture. You are welcome to use any MIDI formatted DAW you want, as long as you have some synths to work with, because these theories can be applied to any environment, so as long as you're using these tools. The tools can remain the same no matter what environment you're working in. So let's take a look-sees real quick. I don't actually want to be using this track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a short ambient work that will utilize, we're still related to the project at hand. Let's make it 4 loops, but we could use 4 loops of different lengths of a slow tempo. We don't have to necessarily talk about making something in a beat, something in a danceable format, So first thing we want to do is check the tempo. Ambient music is slow, so we can make it a slow tempo. I'm at 80 right now. We can go even slower. Let's do 65. Why not? And let's look at our synthesizers. Let's see what we have here. There's a few that are really nice for this. The one that I was using to start was this one, the Monstro 3 oscillator synth with a modulation matrix. There's some cool tools in here, so let's check this out. I'm going to open it up. Here it is. I'm going to hook up my MIDI controller to it real quick, just so we see. Let's test it. Cool. And as we can see, if I hold multiple notes down, it is polyphonic, but it's a little loud right in there. So first thing I want to actually do, because we want to create something softer, and this is more of an abrasive sound, is we want to mess with the envelope. The envelope is what is divided into 4 parts. Technically there's 6 here, but the main 4 parts that we're looking at are the attack, the hold, the attack, the decay, the sustain, and the release. And those 4 parts create the shape of your sound, literally, like how it enters, how it stays, and how it ends, So if I have a short attack at 0, it means it's going to immediately be heard when I hit it, right? If I make a long attack, well, first let's make our full envelope amount. Let's bring it in 100% envelope, and let's bring our attack up a little bit. Let's stay about halfway. What do we do? Like 1? Yeah, 0.98. Let's hear it now. Hear how it sneaks up now, right? So now I can hold multiple notes down. And it comes in nice and slow. So already I've created a different texture here because we're not dealing with necessarily, percussive sounds. We're now dealing with longer sounds, So I can add more hold to it. And all this is going to do is create a longer note values rhythmically, and a longer sustain, which is what we want in ambient music. We do want a long sustain. So I could just hold it for a few seconds, but the note is going to play out for much longer. Let's hear it. I let go already, and it's still playing, right? We've created ourselves a nice long envelope. Pretty good, pretty good. Good long envelope for now. Let's go back to the synth for now. Everybody that we're dealing with here looks to be a sine wave, but what we can do is boost some of these a little bit more, create a more sine wave, smoother tone. Boost this a little more. And that way we won't have as much of a filter sound, or rather a brighter sound. It's going to be a lot warmer now. Actually right here, this is going to allow our brightness to be warmed out a lot more. Hold it. There we go. Smooth it. So, any good ambient synth, especially for a nice little padded chord, gotta add a little filter in there. I'm gonna use a low pass filter. What the low pass filter is gonna do is cut out my highs, and it's gonna make it even warmer sounding. Right now it's already at like 50% cutoff, so let's hear what it sounds like. Ah, very warm. Nice. You know me, I love me some reverb. So let's add ourselves some reverb after our filter. Plate reverb sounds nice. Let's do a 50-50 blend. Let's bring it up to 0.5. And the tail, make it a little longer, 0.5. Ah, nice. So now I got to think of a pattern to play. Maybe I just want to do this little monophonic slow pattern. Let's hear how fast our tempo is. 1, 2. Do something simple like that. Let's make sure actually that we don't have any clipping. It sounded a little clippy there. Let's break down these volumes back to a 0, rather 100%. That way it won't be clipping as much. And then we can actually bring down these envelopes a little bit too. Let's pause that for a second. Pause. Just making my sounds as slow as possible. bring up these envelopes. Make it slower in attack. Yeah, let's keep that there. Nice. Still have a very long sustain here. I could actually bring that sustain down slightly. Release down slightly. Nice. So let's record our first loop of this, shall we? Let's go into our MIDI and lay it down. 1, 2, ready, go. All right, so right there, quantize it. Quantization, by the way, in MIDI is kind of the autocorrect for a lot of rhythmic techniques. If you have something that's not necessarily in the grid, like right here, you can see that it's actually off the downbeat by a 16th note. So I want everything to just be on a downbeat. I don't need it to be quantized any faster than that. I want to just correct it to the downbeat of each measure. I just go to 1-1, meaning one note per measure is going to be quantized to that 1. So I click it, just press Q. Now everything is brought to that 1. I'm going to bring this to the beginning since I waited a bar before I started recording. And now I've created a 4-bar loop. Well, 4-bar passage. Let's make a loop out of it, shall we? Just do Command C, bring it to the next bar beginning. Let's make 16 out of this. My next recording I'm going to do is a different length. Maybe we'll do a measure and a half, something interesting. And then last but not least here, okay. So 16 bars. Basic, right? That's a 4-bar loop, so now let's make a not 4-bar loop, shall we? It's another good synth on here we could use. Last time I was using the organic. It's kind of like a organ generator. And it's really fun, actually. Well, first let's turn off MIDI for the last track and enable it on the new track. Here we go, enable. Oh, hello, why can't I hear you? Oh, I didn't actually say it. There we go. So, cool. It's actually really fun to just randomize it here just by clicking it, and it will create an entirely new quality. Keep going. I'm literally just going to scroll until I hear a sound I like. I want something deeper. Let's go to a lower note. Now we're making dungeon synth. Blah, blah, blah. Still too bright. That's okay. All right, let's deal with the same techniques we were dealing with in the envelope. Let's make a long attack, hold it, decay it for long, sustain it, and release it for blah, blah, blah. Let's hear it. Nice. Good organ sound. So remember, we're not going to be following the same pattern as the first track. We're creating a new length of pattern. So in fact, I'm going to mute the first pattern, so now we are only going to hear this second pattern. Can add some more effects to it here. Let's add effects, period. Let's do another filter. Maybe we won't filter this as much as the previous. I still want to use a low pass. Bring it up a little bit. Less. Just a little bit less. Okay. Cool. And then we can reverberate it. Maybe you want to have some delay before that, actually. Let's do some delay first. Why not? Delay into reverb, canyon delay. This sounds like it'll be perfect for ambient music, because what better idea of a space, a big space, than a canyon, right? So we can change our delay values and let each ear longer and longer. Add some more feedback to it. Hear it left and right a little differently now. Cool. And then last but not least, of course, good old trusty plate reverb. Why not? Let's again make it a 50-50 blend. 5. Here, let's do it in a lower octave. Hear that sustain? That's that spaciousness. That's that ambient spaciousness that we want. So, we're going to record this. Let's practice this first with the metronome on. I'm going to make this a 6 measure long phrase. 3 on one chord, 3 on the other. So count it out with me as we do it. I'm going to wait 4 bars before I start. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3. Nice. Okay. So right there, that's a 6-bar passage. Slow as heck, right? Where'd it go? Ah, it started over here, that's why. Where are you? There we go. Man, bring it to the beginning. Okay, and then we go to the end of the 6th bar, right here. Let's see how long that is. Okay, so right here at the end of the 7th, or rather at the end of the 6th, we can copy and paste it and loop it again. And then the end of the 12th, same idea, right? So maybe we want to find a common denominator between these different lengths. Maybe we do 24. Yeah, and that way it ends on the 25th bar. So that means we have to go back here to the first track. And loop this again so that we hit the 24. All right, cool. So right now we have a bar in 4 and a bar in 6, or a part in 4 and a part in 6, meaning they're going to start at different times. I don't know what this is going to sound like together. Let's take a listen and test it out. Interesting. We can pan them left and right, make some different stereo textures happen. It's coming out of different places. Left and right, left and right. Nice. That's only 2 loops, you know? Let's add one more. Let's see what we got here for another track that we can add. Some synthesis here. Vibrating string modeler. It's going to actually sound like a string. I'm not sure. Some of these aren't very string-like. They're kind of tacky. This looks like a waveform to me. That doesn't sound like a string. What other presets we got? Oh, whoops, go back. You can draw a wave. Interesting. Kind of sounds like a bass, I guess. So we were talking about texture earlier, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we only have to use, you know, non-percussive, long envelope sounds to create textures. We can use rhythmic sounds, but the point is not that we're focusing on a downbeat like we would a beat. We're not necessarily thinking about the one of the 1, 2, 3, 4. You know what I'm saying? So what I want to do here is create not a rhythmic arpeggio, but an arpeggiator, but an arpeggiator that isn't in sync with the other 2 parts, that's kind of doing its own thing, so that we're creating more of this, you know, unabrasive, massive sound so that it's harder to pay attention to one layer. I want this all to be layered together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a textured arpeggiator by using the arpeggiator mode here, delay, reverb, things like that. I don't know if I'm happy with this sound yet. What's the S here? Stiffness, position, pickup position, length. I don't even know what I'm doing. Let's just go back to sine wave. Sine waves are cool. Has a little pluck to it. I like that. So let's go into the arpeggiator, turn it on. I just play it by itself. What we could do to make it even more interesting is to make a randomized arpeggiator so that we're not even necessarily hearing the pattern repeat itself. It's going to be randomized every single time algorithmically. Put it in syncopated mode, bring that gate, make it nice and tight. Nice. Bring it down. Bring it down a little bit. Not too fast. I don't know. Reset it to 1. Do a little bit faster. Damn, man, the sensitivity. Ah, I see, I can do it like that. Then I can go into the envelope here. You get a little more bowed out, right? And that attack down just a little bit. Nice. Make that gate longer now. Nice. Make it a little louder. Now let's leave it in that octave. Slap. Yeah. Okay. That's too much. Okay, cool. So, again, let's make it warm though. We don't need it to be bright. We want it warm. So, filter it. Oops, not the one that I wanted. Not the effect that I want. Let's add the right effect that I want. Low pass filter. There we go. Cool. Nice filtered sound. Let's get some ping pong delays going on here, left and right, shall we? Let's use that. Whoops, nope. Again, I keep clicking too fast. Let's go back, put that correct delay in there, canyon delay, right? And now we can make these a little shorter in time. Bring up the feedback. 0.5 feedback for each. This one could be there, this one there. Nice. Now we're talking about our nice mass layers of arpeggiated notes. Can't tell where the downbeat is anymore, and I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you how many notes I'm holding down. So we have that. Might as well add a little reverb at the end of the tail. Make it all nice and plated. Cool. All right, so let's mute the others for now. How long should we record this one for? Let's make it a weird number. Let's see how many bars we should record for. I'm gonna make this 5.5 bars. Screw it. That means that on the 2, wait, hold on, no. No. Let's make 24 our thing here. Let's do it in weird numbers, and we'll just end it on the 24 anyways. No one's going to notice because we're doing randomized arpeggiators here, so we can't really be thinking about back on the 1 at the beginning of each measure, right? Even if we're in 4/4 in the program itself, it's not going to feel that way with this arpeggiator. So let's record for 5.5 bars, and we're going to loop that a few times, shall we? Turn the thing back on. 1, 2, there we go. See, it doesn't even match up with the rhythm. That's what we want. Coming up on the halfway. 2, wow. Nice. Okay. So for this, we're going to have to, because we're dealing with half measures, I want to deal with half note quantizers here. Let's bring this to the 1. And we're going to bring this to the 5.5 point right here. And then we are going to re-loop it at this point right here. Loop. And now it's going to end at the 10. Did I do 4.5 bars? I did 5.5 bars. Oh, I see. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Just going to end it at the 24 like everything else. And then we will just trim these to end on the 24. Cool. So now everything goes the same length. You can see it. All right. Moment of truth, guys. How does my ambient track sound? I have no idea. Let's go ahead and hear it. They're all the same length, but they don't have to enter at the same time. Let's drag them out a little bit. Let's get start. Let's have the arpeggiator start first. Nah, let's do it in the order that we started. Grab it. This is going to start on the 4. This is going to start on the 9. And then, how do we want to end it? What is the ending out here? 33. Let's bring this all the way to 33. Cut the rest here. There we go. Move those out. This goes to the 33. This one can go there. This one. I don't know how many times we want to loop it for, but I want it to end before the other ones do. So let's put that here. Yeah. Works for me. Let's hear it. Final product. 3 parts, 3 loops, 3 different lengths, 3 different types of synthesis or synthesizer settings that we're working with. You know, weird, no rhythmic, randomized, algorithmic arpeggios, padded synths, reverberation, delay, and long envelopes, baby. That's what we're talking about when we talk about ambient music. Let's hear it. They're just moving in a few different octaves, random orders of the like 7 or 8 notes that I was holding down on the MIDI. Get a little overdrive in there. We would compress that when we finalize it. It's a nice little ambient scene right there. I could see that for any number of film media scoring settings, or just, you know, chilling out, listening to some of that while working on music or working on homework from quarantine. So if this inspires you, I hope that you make some awesome ambient soundscapes of your own using these synthesizers for this project. You know, the project does not need to be a you know, any sort. Whoa, hold on. Let's bring back Brian for the end. The project does not need to be any sort of you know, beat. It can be something completely different. It could be a soundscape like this. It can be, you know, longer, sort of droning out environmental sort of ambient sounds. You're creating a soundscape through synthesis here. So think about what you want to do, but hopefully this was, you know, interesting, and maybe it inspires you a little bit. So I hope y'all make some dope tracks. looking forward to hearing them. So, enjoy the rest of your day, have a good weekend, and let's make some dope music. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.